Well, good afternoon and welcome to our May members meeting. I'm Rick Meredith, the president of Capital Crimes, and we are so pleased to have Michael Bracken as our guest today to discuss how to establish a career writing short crime fiction. Our VP, Chris Dreith, will introduce Michael, but before we begin, let me detail some of our upcoming events. On Sunday, May 17th, Mac Daly will be hosting a crime time event at the Old Haunts Bookshop in Granite Bay. And then on June 9th, our Meet the Author guest is Elizabeth Crowans. And then our monthly members meeting next month will be held on Saturday, June 20th at the Tabor Ranch Winery in Yolo County. We were there last year and we had a blast, so I hope you can make it out there. But be sure to check our newsletter, the rap sheet, and our website for our full calendar of events. And let me ask you to please mute your audio and turn off the video during the presentation. But if you miss anything, Michael's interview will be on our YouTube channel in about a week. And finally, if you have any questions for Michael, put it in chat and Chris will ask the questions during our Q&A. With that, I'm going to hand off to Chris to introduce Mike, and thank you all for attending.
Okay. Hi. Hang on. Let me get everything here. Oh, hey, not you. Hi, Dan. Hit the wrong one. Okay. Where are you, Michael?
You have me again. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, you can tell how much fun this is. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you all. Whew. Thank you all for joining us today. If you've never met or listened to a presentation by Michael Bracken, you are in for a treat. It's great. And if you happen to read his bio and wondered how someone could write more than 1,300 short stories and have them published, as well as edit or co-edit more than 13 anthologies, all the time racking
36.
up award. Oh, 36? Oh,
yeah.
See? It's building as we go. All the time racking up awards like Derringer, Shamus, Anthony's, Edgar's, probably more than I have ever heard of. But and still he has time to share some of his knowledge with us. I have a clue how he does this. We were on the same flight a few years ago, traveling to Left Coast Crime or maybe VoucherCon, I can't remember. And while we were waiting in the terminal, Michael would whip out his cell phone every now and then, do a little quick thing, and then tuck it back in. And I thought, wow, this guy's really busy. He's got all these emails or texts. But then when we got on the plane, we were entertained by a lady of a certain age sitting next to us and telling us about her husband who traveled for work a lot. And he always carried a briefcase full of lollipops because when little kids would scream or fuss or something like that on a plane or a train, he would hand them a lollipop. And both Michael and I kind of looked at each other and went, yeah, maybe that would be a little weird right now, seeing a stranger hand out candy to kids. And I saw him pull out his cell phone and write Lollipop Man in it and then stick it back in his pocket. Now, I have not read a short story called Lollipop Man yet, but I bet you that it's in his queue somewhere. Anyway, he's always thinking, I've always been impressed by him, and it's a pleasure to introduce my friend Michael Bracken. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And since she's outlined my whole career, I'm done here. No, what I'm going to do is in a moment, I'm going to switch this over to a PowerPoint presentation. But the important thing to know is you can go to a lot of Zoom and conferences and whatnot and hear a lot of people talk about plotting and character and setting and how to write a good short story. And many of those presentations are excellent. but very rarely does anybody give you how to make a career of it, the business side of being a short story writer. So that's what I'm going to be concentrating on today. And it's the kind of stuff, a lot of it, I wish I knew when I started. I had to learn it by the hard way. And so I'm going to be a lot of tips, tricks, techniques, things you can do that will help you advance faster. This doesn't mean you can sidetrack the writing. You still have to write. You have to write a lot. You have to write well, and you have to continue getting better. But there are some ways you can speed up the process of being a published writer, making a career of it. So what I'm going to do is, if you've got the handout, you can see all the fluff about what I've done. So let's get right into the presentation. The important thing to realize is that while writing is an art, publishing is a business. So after you've written, after you've been the creative person, you need to stop and say, now put on your business hat. Think about how you're going to move forward. So one of the first things you need to do, and you should probably do this before you start writing, or at least before you start submitting, is determine your byline. And that's important because your byline is everything. What's your name? What name are you publishing under?
I would do differently if I could.
What would you do differently if you could?
I wouldn't have separated them as
Would
puppies.
somebody mute their?
Okay.
Somebody please mute
Whatever,
their audio.
Yes, exactly.
So first we're going to separate the puppies.
So
And then anyhow, determine your byline. One of the things I did when I started is I wrote under three different versions of my name: Michael Patrick Bracken, Michael Bracken, Mike Bracken, and it was just a confusing mess. So I settled on Michael Bracken. That's my byline. That goes on everything I write. There's a caveat to that we'll get to later. Everything I write that I want my name on, I use that byline. And I'm very consistent. That's how I sign my emails. That's the name I use consistently. So if you are, for example, you have a middle initial like Joseph S. Walker. Some of you have read his work. Great guy. John M. Floyd. So if that's your byline, you have something like that, you have a middle initial, I recommend that you put that in your signature line in your email, that you make sure that on your website it's like that. If you have a nickname, be careful. I don't ever identify myself as Mike Bracken, and that's how I can tell people don't know me. It's Michael for every single thing I do throughout my life. It's consistent. My byline is who I am. So you need to figure out what your byline is, and you need to be consistent in your use of it. You should establish a professional email address. Ideally, use your name. Or, for example, this ties into my website. My email address is michael@crimefictionwriter.com. We'll talk about websites in a moment. But what you don't want to do is have an email address that's hottotrot@aol.com or gonefishing@gmail.com. That has nothing to do with your profession, unless you're writing about fish or horse racing. So make sure your email address, the one you use for your writing career, is consistent, ideally has your name in it. Because when the editor is scrolling through their inbox, they might not remember that Hot to Trot is Michael Bracken or Gone Fishing is Michael Bracken, but they see an email from Michael Bracken, they go, oh, that's Michael Bracken. Then that ties into your website. You need a professional website. Ideally, in today's world, your website should have your name. So if I was doing a website today, my website would be michaelbracken.com or michaelbrackenwriter.com or some variation. Unfortunately, I started back in the Stone Age and I chose crime fiction writer, which describes what I do, but it's not, doesn't make you automatically think Michael Bracken. But I've had this website address, this URL for so long that I'm not going to try to change everything now. But if you're brand new and just starting out, try to get your URL in your name. And then your professional website should reflect who you are and what you write. For example, if you write humor, your website should probably display some humor. If you're a dead serious writer, Your website should reflect that. And certain things need to be on your website, the titles of your books and the publisher. And with short stories, list the short stories, where they've been published. For example, best story ever, Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, January, February 2006, or whatever the details. So that if somebody comes to your website, they can say, oh, this writer has written for Hitchcock and Queen and About Your Con anthology and a Sync anthology, and Rock in a Hard Place and whatever. They can find that information. There needs to be contact information on there. So it's part calling card, it's part promotion, and it's part resume. So look at a lot of websites of writers whose work you admire and you like, and see what they have on there and how they're done. And let's be honest, a professional website is not cheap. So you may want to start with a home-built website initially. I did my own website for many, many years, and the technology finally got to the point where I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I wound up hiring somebody to rework my website and redesign it. Social media. If you're going to have a career as a short story writer, you need to use social media. That's going to be how you connect with writers and editors and how you promote your work. There's debate on which are the best social media outlets, and some writers have great success with Facebook. Some do really good with Twitter X. Some are on Blue Sky or Threads. I'm on at least 4 of them. And I try to post consistently on Facebook and Twitter, and a little less often on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Just because I'm more comfortable. I've been on Facebook and X longer. I'm more comfortable with that. But that's where you connect and use social media. And we're going to talk a little bit more about not just promoting yourself, but how you can use it to help your career. Oh, come on, come back here. Where'd you go? There we go. Finding markets. A lot of writers don't realize this, but at any given moment, there are hundreds of potential markets for your short stories. But you have to really know how to look for them. We'll get to that in just a pinch. So one of the things I often see is writers, there's no place to send my stories, and yet you give me an hour, I can probably give you 2-3 dozen places to send where you can submit stories today. Now, the thing is, do you have appropriate stories? Maybe, maybe not. But they are places you can send your work. The key thing is, until you are well established, no editor is likely to come looking for you. So you have to make the effort to go out and find the publications. And the most important thing you can do is start with the crime fiction publications that you read regularly. And I hope those include Alfred Hitchcock and Ellery Queen. Those are the 2 top paying, most recognized mystery magazines in the field. If you're not reading them consistently, you should be. You should subscribe to them, support them. But those aren't the only ones. Here, the field keeps changing a little bit. I hope all of these are still being published. But keep an eye out. Look for these publications. Maybe you subscribe. Maybe you just buy 1 copy. Or you borrow one from a friend. But you need to read them and see them. And what are they publishing? And learn more about them. I've had work in several of these. I've been rejected by several more. And there's a couple I still want to try. And then, of course, there are the convention anthologies. About Your Con and Malice do one every year. Left Coast Crime did one a couple of years ago, but I don't think they're consistent about it. And then organization anthologies. Mystery Writers of America, it's been a while, but they publish anthologies. Various Sisters in Crime chapters publish anthologies. And there are other organizations, not necessarily crime fiction organizations, but local writers group who publish anthologies. So keep your eyes open for all of those opportunities. Join Facebook groups. There's one called Crime Thriller Mystery Markets. There's one called Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Pulp Markets. There's one called Horror Markets. There are several others on Facebook. And those are groups where editors and publishers come on and post links to markets that are looking for work. Or sometimes writers see, for example, I might spot a new market and I might then go to one of these lists and post the information I have and say, I'm not the editor, but I just found this market. And then the writing organizations. Mystery Writers of America, Private Eye Writers of America, Short Mystery Fiction Society, Sisters in Crime, and others. The organizations, sometimes through their newsletters, through meeting each other on Zoom or in person, you start conversing with other members, you start learning about all the various markets. But one of the key things to do, even in addition to all of those, and sometimes more important than all of those, is to really learn how to use your search engine. And this is a variation of what I did when I first started. Back in the day, we're talking way back in the day, I used to go to the magazine shops. There were actually stores that all they had in them were magazines. Go to magazine shops or go to the magazine racks at grocery stores. And I would stand in front of them and open every magazine I found, looking for magazines that published fiction. And I found magazines that weren't in the Writer's Digest or the Writer's Market or anything like that. The same thing happens online. There are publications out there that don't promote themselves through Duotrope and the other aggregate sites. And you can only find them if you actively search for them. So here are a couple of ideas of search parameters to put in your search bar. And then what I usually do is I put a limit. There's a way you can say, only search for these within the past month or the past week. So you're not getting calls for submission that are a year or 2 years old. And I do this these days about twice a month. I go and I look and see, are there any markets out there? And so sometimes I see a call for submissions and I go, oh, I want to try to write for that. Sometimes I see a call and go, oh, I have a story that fits those parameters and I can submit it. Other things to do is you should purchase or at least rent from the library, borrow from a friend, the best American mystery and suspense, the best mystery stories of the year, and the best private eye stories of the year. These are, now realize you may not agree with the editor's choices, but you will discover that they find stories in places you've never heard of. Magazines, websites, periodic anthologies. And you look at those and you go, oh, wow, I should maybe learn more about Joe's Garage of Fiction. I never heard of that, but they had a best of year story, a story selected for best of year. There's something I need to look at. Study the yearly awards. Where were all the award nominees published? That will give you another thing, another way to find markets you may not be aware of. Where were all the Derringer Award nominees this year published? Where were all the Edgar Award nominees published? Where were all the Agatha and Anthony nominees published? You will find markets that way, and then go out and find their websites and find their calls for submission. And then identify who edited the Anthony nominated anthologies this year, last year, the year before. And then now that the Short Mystery Fiction Society has an anthology category, look at those. Who edited them? So, where's my button? There we go. Go back. So, whoa, come back. There we go. Anyhow. And these are ways that you start to find the various markets. And then we'll go back a little bit to social media is once you, for example, identified editors of anthologies that you would have liked to have contributed to if you'd have known about them in time, start following those editors on their social media. For example, a few years ago, I saw a call for submission for an anthology from Maxim Jakubowski. If you've been around a while, he's a very well-known editor of anthologies, also a well-known writer. And I learned later, I have never seen a call for submission for one of his projects anywhere except on his Facebook page. And I've sold stories to, I believe, 2 of his anthologies because I saw it on his Facebook. A couple of years ago, as kind of a joke, I said that I thought there should be an anthology of stories inspired by Aerosmith called Janie's Got a Gun. I said, anybody out there want to publish it? Or anybody interested? Within 24 hours, I had a publisher contact me, and I had a complete roster of people who had volunteered to contribute to it. And it was all because of an off-the-cuff post I made on Facebook. So social media can be your friend, and this is how you find all that information, by following these people. And follow the writers. For example, follow John Floyd. He publishes a whole lot of stories. Where is he getting published? Can you submit to those places? So follow social media accounts of editors, follow blogs and websites of editors, follow prolific writers where their work is published. Then make friends with other writers and share market information. These relationships are independent of critique groups. These are just people you talk to, other writers you talk to, who's buying, what they're buying, what have you heard on the scuttlebutt about market A or editor B. I've got a friend in Canada. He and I write for several of the same magazines. Our writing styles are nothing alike. I would never ask him to critique my work, and he would probably never ask me to critique his work because our styles are so different. But because we write for the same publications, we can share background information. Say, oh, I just sold a story to so-and-so. Have you heard of them? Or so-and-so publisher is dragging out payments. You might want to be wary. All sorts of background information. And again, separate that from your critique group. This is not a let's all be better writers. This is all be better business people as writers. Don't wear blinders. Seek publication outside your genre. This was brought home to me early in my career. I wanted to be a science fiction writer. I wanted to be the next Isaac Asimov or Robert Heinlein. And I was getting lots and lots of rejections, selling occasionally to the really minor markets. Back in the day, they were called semi-prozines. If they paid a quarter of a cent a word or half a cent a word. And an editor of a men's magazine, actually, a top-paying men's magazine, rejected one of my science fiction stories and said, you know, I really liked it. The publisher doesn't want science fiction. And he had actually completely rewritten my story and retyped it back in the days of typewriters. So I sat down, learned what I could from his edit of my science fiction story, and wrote a mystery, and he bought it. I wrote a second mystery, and he bought it. I wrote a third mystery, and it sold to Mike Shane Mystery Magazine. So mysteries were 3 for 3, and science fiction fantasy was like 3 for 300. So look at those other markets. What you most want to write may not be what you are best at writing. Same applies. Maybe your cat cozies are being rejected by everybody. Write a private eye story. Maybe your private eye stories are being rejected by everybody. Write a cat cozy. Give it a try. Try other things. Now, the nice thing about mystery and crime fiction is it's not limited to the mystery and crime magazines. Look at women's magazines. Look at children's magazines. Look at general interest magazines. Saturday Evening Post, for example, publishes mysteries, both in the magazine and on their website. And I believe they're paying, last I heard, it was $25 a story. They publish other things as well, but they do publish mysteries. Look at markets in other countries. Don't limit yourself to the country you live in. Look around. I've sold stories in Italy, Germany, the UK, Ireland, Australia, China, all over the world. So look at those opportunities. Don't limit yourself. And look at alternate delivery methods. Every so often somebody tries a cell phone app for fiction. And I've sold to a couple of those. They come and go, but they're there. Look for them. Consider audiobooks. There are audio publishers. I've sold several short stories. They weren't mysteries, but several short stories to audio publishers. Podcasts sometimes will buy short stories to produce on their podcast. And then very important, now you've got the story, you've written the story, you have the story, you found a market or two that you think would be perfect place to send your story. Then very, very, very important is read and follow the submission guidelines. If they want it in 14-point Comic Sans with 4-inch margins on all sides, you do it. It may be weird, but if that's what they want, you do it. So my instructions from this point on are, if they don't give you specific guidelines, here's what you should probably do. Number 1, put your name, address, telephone number, and email address on the first page of your manuscript. It's vitally important that editors can find you. what has happened, and outside of the mystery field, I edit a gardening magazine. I've done that for 20 plus years. I've worked on newspapers and other things. So this applies across all publishing. If the editor can't find you, they can't buy your work. So most of the projects I work on, publications I work on, your submission gets separated from your email. And it goes into a file, a folder, either online or on paper. And then at some point as editors, we go through and we look at stuff and we go, oh, I'd like to publish this. There's your name, there's your address, there's your phone number, there's your email, bing, we can contact you. But if I can't find you quickly, and again, that's because you're gone fishing at yahoo.com, has no relationship whatever to your name, I can't find you. And I go, well, that's it. You don't even get a rejection because I don't know who the hell you are and how to find you. And I have tossed submissions because of that. And I know other editors have too. The other thing is, why do you want your phone number? You go, oh, that's kind of personal out there. You know, I don't want freaks calling me. There are times when your email bounces and there's no other way. So we need a secondary way to contact you. We all email, we hope it's perfect, but we know it's not. So there are occasions where if I email somebody and I've given them, say, a week to respond and I need a yes or a no, well, I can pick up the phone and I can call. And I have had several times where editors have called me about something. Luckily, all my contact information is there. And they were calling, they ask a question, they have more information, whatever. Not a lot of people use the phone anymore because they text, but still, they have to have a way to text you. Unless specifically instructed, 12-point Times New Roman, double space, no extra space between paragraphs, blah, blah, blah. Put a header on your pages that includes your name, story title, and page number. Some of us still read sometimes on paper, and there's been occasions where I have walked across the house with somebody's manuscript in my hand and tripped over a cat or a dog or a thing in the bump in the rug, and pages went flying. And instead of trying to put them all back together again, I just threw it away and had to reprint it so that everything was in order. You don't want to make an editor work like that. Now, a lot of people work online and it doesn't matter. And again, follow guidelines. Some editors don't want page numbers and headers on your pages. I think they're weird, but that's them. And include your byline. That's the line underneath your title that is, so best story ever by Michael Bracken. So what happens too often, and I've seen this several times, where the writer puts their name on there with their name and address, but the name they want to get paid under is not the name they get published under. And then they wonder why their byline gets screwed up in the magazine or the anthology. They want to be George M. Smith-Jones, but they don't put a byline on there. And at the top of their manuscript, they just put George Jones, whatever. So make sure that your byline is the name you want to be published under. And ideally, the name you want to be published under is the same name you want to be paid under. But there are reasons people use pseudonyms. So we may have time to talk about that. So, there we go. Manuscript format. Those of you who have the handout can print it out. That's essentially what your manuscript should look like. This is from a story I had published in Alfred Hitchcock several years ago. It's the first couple of pages. That's essentially what your manuscript should look like. Somehow I think I skipped something. No, maybe not. Okay. Now, remember, editors are not your friends yet. So you need to be professional in every encounter. Your cover letter is likely going to be your first contact with an editor. So it needs to be simple. It needs to tell the editor what's enclosed if using snail mail, or what's attached if using email. A brief note about your previous sales, if any. Brief mention of any connection you may have with the editor, and conclude appropriately. Too many times, as editors, I get emails that are multiple paragraphs long, tell me how great the author's mother thinks their story is, how their writers group really loved this story, and they give me the entire plot of the story, and they give me all sorts of information that has no bearing on what I need to know. I need to know the title in your cover letter. I need to know the title, I need to know who you are and something about the story. For example, boom, start with the subject line. So in the subject line, title of the magazine or publication, that it's a submission, and this is the title of the story. So when I'm scrolling through all my emails, I can say, oh, this is a submission to my anthology, Mickey Finn, for a story called Die and Die Again. I know what it is. I can open it up. And then the cover letter is simple. Dear Mr. Bracken, attached is Die and Die Again, a 4,000-word noir story that may be appropriate for your upcoming anthology, Mickey Finn Volume 7. I look forward to hearing from you soon. If you don't have any credits or credentials to add in there, and even if you do, that's, shall we say, the minimum you need to do, and in many cases, it's the maximum you need to do. Title of the story, how long it is, what kind of a story it is, and what you're submitting it for. So if you're dealing with an editor like me who may have 2 or 3 projects going on at the same time, I need to know which project this is for. If you have some credentials, you may add another line. My stories have appeared in this case, Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine and 2 BoucherCon anthologies. It could also be I'm an award, I'm a Nebula, or I'm an Edgar, or I'm a Shamus award-winning writer, or whatever. You don't want your entire history of publication, but the most critical things. What's impressive? If you've ever been in a best of anthology, best mystery stories of the year, that's a good thing. If you've won an Edgar or been shortlisted or won a Shamus or won an Agatha, that's a good thing. But you don't need to put everything. Another thing you might do occasionally, if you don't have those kind of credentials, you might have a credential that's important. For example, if you are writing a medical thriller short story and you've been an ER nurse for 30 years, that's a good thing. We know it's a medical thriller because that's in your first sentence. You go, I have been an ER nurse for the past 30 years and bring my experience to this story. Or if it's a police procedural, I have been a beat cop in New York City for the past 22 years. Or something that says, I have the experience that I brought to this story. You're writing a cat cozy. I have been a professional cat sitter for 12 years, whatever. Those are things you can put in your cover letter. As you're dealing with editors, generally speaking, you want one-topic emails. It's a dilemma. If you send an email and you've got 3 questions and they're about 3 unrelated things, it's difficult as an editor to know where to file that email. So I can answer question 1 now, but I have to research to answer question 2, and I don't know what the heck question 3 is all about. But if you ask me the questions and I only answer 1, you go, oh, he forgot the other 2. Well, try to trim it down. Your cover letter with your story, you don't mention a previous submission as, well, what happened to the story I submitted 6 months ago? As you gain experience and you develop relationships, and you gain more stories, your cover letters might become more casual. Writers I've worked with many times don't send things that are quite this formal. And they may end with something like, say hello to your wife or best wishes to your, whatever. You over time may develop a relationship that's more than just editor-writer, but it's never an unprofessional relationship. So we're encountering editors in the real world, conferences, conventions, and Zoom meetings, sort of. The same rules apply. Be professional. Don't be drunk. Don't be high. Don't be rude. Don't do anything that would embarrass your mother if she heard about it. Because word gets around. Crime fiction is a small community. And then treat other writers with the same level of professionalism that you treat your editors, because someday they might be editors. In the past couple of years, several writers who have written for me, and several more who have not, had an opportunity. They've edited an anthology. And I want them to think of me and say, hey, I always had a professional relationship with Michael. Maybe I should invite him to my project. But if they think, oh no, he threw up on my shoes at the last BoucherCon, you go, I don't care how good he is as a writer, I don't trust him. Or so keep that in mind. It's a very fun, it's a very welcoming community of writers, but you still have to maintain some level of professionalism. Check your spam folder every day. It is so frustrating when I accept a story or I request revisions and I get no response and no response and no response and no response. And then I find out that my email's been sitting in a spam folder for days, weeks. And it's happened to me several times. I've had stuff show up in my spam folder, and that's what taught me, pay attention. Same thing if you're submitting via Submittable. Submittable is supposed to send you a message every time you get a response, but it doesn't. And I had a story sitting there like 30 days once in my Submittable, and I go, oh, geez, I had, I'm sorry, I missed this, blah, 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 very begging for forgiveness email, and everything worked out. But still, 30 days without responding to an acceptance is not good. Respond promptly to every email that requires a response. A rejection does not require a response. So if I send out 100 rejections and then I get 100, oh, thank you very much for rejecting my story, you've just clogged up my email. If you respond to a rejection, there has to be a very valid reason. And thank you is not usually it. Now, what will happen occasionally, an editor will say, this isn't right for us, but you might try such and so publication. Now, if you then send it to the other publication, your story was bought, it's nice to write back to respond to the original rejection, say, thank you, Michael. I submitted it to Joe Blow's House of Fiction, and they bought it, and I never would have known about that if you hadn't said something. Or if I recommend a revision, I say, but I strongly recommend you do all these things, but still not going to be right for us. And you do all the revisions and then sell it somewhere else. It's nice to send a thank you. So you're not directly responding to a rejection, you're responding to the advice or the suggestions the editor made. Also, on your next submission, if you got a really nice rejection, you can mention that. Say, you recently rejected my story, second best crime story in the world, and suggested that I try a story with more dialogue next time. And well, enclose the such and so story, and I've tried to improve my dialogue for you. If an editor requests a revision, you should probably do it. If you disagree with any part of it, you can discuss the changes with the editor. Most editors are not hardcore. So many times, and I've been on both sides of this, an editor will say, you need to fix this, and this is what I suggest you do. Sometimes the editor is right, and you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes the editor makes a suggestion, and you go, oh, I see what you're doing, or why you want this change, but here's an even better way to fix it. And most editors will work with you and go, oh, you're right, that is better than what I suggested. Occasionally, an editor will request something, and you absolutely know that will ruin the story. You have the right to say, no, I'm sorry, no, thank you, and move on. But most of the time, most editors want your story to be the best it can be, and they want it to be appropriate for whatever they're publishing, which are not always mutually compatible. We may help you make a great story that's still not right for us. Or to make it right for us makes it just slightly not the perfect story. It's a little weird, but it happens. Respond to sign and return contracts promptly. It is frustrating to send a contract out for a project and you don't get the contract back for weeks. There's really no excuse for that unless you're traveling overseas or something. And never ask your editor to explain your contract. I'm not a lawyer, but I have been told that the moment the editor explains something in your contract, they are creating an addendum or a codicil to the contract. And the editor doesn't want to do that. So if you don't understand your contract, find another writer to help you, find a lawyer, find some other source to help you understand your contract. Read and return, correct and return copy edits and page proofs promptly. If there's ever a problem, what you can do is say, thank you, Michael, I cannot return this by the 15th because I'm traveling in Hawaii for the next 2 weeks. Can I get it to you as soon as I return? Most editors build in a little fudge. They tell you what the deadline is. They usually build in a few days, sometimes a few weeks, because we know writers don't hit deadlines. Wish it wasn't true, but we know they don't hit deadlines. And we want to at least be open to those writers who have legitimate reasons. You know, my wife just ran over the dog. My mother-in-law has just gone into the hospital. The neighbor started a fire in our backyard, whatever. There's an excuse, and it's a legitimate excuse for not being able to take care of it right then. Then you may be asked to write a bio to accompany your story. Again, follow guidelines. Some editors want something different than this, but basically, again, keep it short and professional. So here's an example of a bio I might turn in. It's my name, some award nominations, number of stories published, where the two of the top markets they've been published in, and my editing background. So again, with awards. I don't talk about my dogs, my cats, my kids, my neighborhood, what inspired the story, none of that. And I don't waste time with, you can read more of his work at, because you just used up words that you could use to better sell yourself. Now, some editors want your website like I've done it. Some will put it at the end. And I've had a few editors who will strike it from your bio. But put it in there. And let the editor strike it if they don't want it. And again, you will occasionally find an editor who wants something more. For example, when I did an anthology of stories, privatized stories set in Texas, I asked each of the authors to include in their bio their connection to Texas. You know, some of them might have said, I graduated from college at Texas Christian University. I was born and raised in Texas, but now live in California. I passed through Texas once by accident. Some of them had to stretch a little bit for their Texas connections. But so watch for special instructions. You probably have a boilerplate bio. Don't use your boilerplate every time. Read what the editor wants from you and rewrite your bio to fit. Now, here's the one that I probably should have started with, and everybody wants to know is, how much can you earn writing a short story? Well, alas, everything from nothing to potentially unlimited. Just as an example, the most I've ever received for a first publication of a short story was $1,000. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I had a co-author, so we split it $500 each, but it was $1,000. And I've many times, multiple hundreds of dollars for stories. Reprint rights, again, it's unlimited. I have sold reprints to some stories that paid far more than the original. I had one story was paid $25 for the original publication and $500 for the reprint. It's a screwed up system, but the potential is just a wide range. But never pay to be published. If a magazine says, well, we'll publish your story if you can send us $50, no. And we're not talking about self-publication. That's a whole different genre of conversation. But you don't pay somebody to publish your work. Contests. There's a whole lot of back and forth on contests. Should you ever enter contests? Should you not enter contests?
You should kind of stop using your teeth.
So what you want to do, my opinion, is consider what you get for your entry fee. If your entry fee is $10 and the winner gets their story photocopied in a stapled a little handout, and that's the winner, and it's probably not worth it. But if your entry fee for $10, the winner gets dinner and a 2-hour critique from Stephen King, and second place is lunch and an hour with John Floyd, and third place is whatever, you go, okay, that's that. $10 with the possibility of lunch with Stephen King and him critiquing my story, that might be worth the $10. The other thing is consider what your entry fee does. For example, many years ago, I was in a local writers organization in Illinois. We published an annual publication that was actually photocopied and stapled of the winners for second, third place. And I forget whether there was an entry fee. But what it was doing was raising money to keep the organization going. It wasn't really about, you won first place in this contest. It was not going to change your life in any way. But it felt good to stand in front of your friends and say, oh, I got first place, and the money supported the organization, allowed them to put on events. So it was worthwhile. So if the potential benefit does not outweigh the cost, avoid the contest. You need to understand copyright, and it's a whole long conversation beyond what there's time to cover here. But copyright is a pie that can be sliced in an innumerable number of ways. There's first rights, second rights, English language, German language, world rights, universal rights, I guess. You can be first to publish in German in Botswana. You can be the first to publish in Japanese in Russia. You can be the first to publish in a magazine, which is a serial. You can be published in an anthology. You can publish on a coffee cup. You can be published broadcast, media rights of various kinds, radio, TV, movie, podcast. You can animation rights. There are so many different rights that you can possibly license, because you're licensing rights. Unless somebody is buying all rights, they are licensing certain rights from you. Now, all rights versus work for hire, there's a difference. If you sign a work for hire contract, it means the work was never, ever yours. So example, if you work for a company and you do the company newsletter and they pay you every week to write that newsletter, that's a work for hire. You are employed to do that specific task. They own all rights. It works the same way in like Marvel Universe and whatnot. But if you sell all rights, there's an acknowledgement that you own all of the rights. And by signing this contract, you are selling all of those rights to the publisher. Now, the net effect is you either never had the rights or you've given up the rights, but they are significantly different, and understand those differences. Your contracts spell out much more than which rights transfer and how long. They may give the publisher right to use your likeness in promoting the magazine or anthology in which your work appears. It may, there are just so many things. I've seen contracts for short stories that were a one-page long and some that were multiple pages long. So in a perfect world, the rights that transfer, the more rights that transfer, the more that you should be paid, but we don't live in a perfect world. So your goal is to sell the fewest number of, or to license the fewest number of rights for the most amount of money. And then also be careful is a lot of writers say, well, when do my rights return to me? Well, most of the time your rights do not return to you. What happens is if you sell First North American serial rights, which is the right to be the first publisher of a serial, which is a magazine or newspaper in North America to publish the story. The moment they have published it, those rights have been used. You can never, ever sell them or license them to anybody ever again. They're gone. They're used. But if that's all they license, you don't have to wait for them to give you back anything, because you still have other rights. You still have audio rights. You still have movie rights. You still have anthology rights. You have all of those things because you didn't license them. So you're not waiting for them to give you something back that they never took from you. And then also be aware, never blame others if you sign a bad contract. This is really important. I have seen too many writers who bitch and moan and say, oh, they took all my rights and they did this and they did this. Well, you signed the contract. It's your responsibility to read and understand your contract. And if you sign a bad contract, you need to know that it's bad. I have signed bad contracts, knowing full well they were bad contracts. Early in my career, I wrote for a group of magazines. They bought all rights, but they paid promptly, and I had kids to feed, a roof over my head to take care of, car payments, needed to put food on the table, whatnot, and the money was rolling in. And I didn't think closely about what about the future. Well, in the past 5 or 6 years, I've seen some of those stories showing up in anthologies. Now, the good thing is I did not use my name on the byline. So unless you know me, you don't know that I necessarily know that I wrote those stories. But so the trade-off is the money I got then paid for things I needed to pay for. Today, it would be nice to have a few extra bucks that those stories might bring in as reprint rights, but it's not critical. It's not something I'm going to complain about. but I did it knowing they were bad. So I have no right to complain, and you should too, understand. Then you need to study your sales. Determine if you finally broke into a market, determine why the editor accepted your story. For example, they've rejected 10 private eye stories in a row, and then they bought your cat cozy. Well, it could be that you've over time gotten to be a better writer. Or it could be that you're not a good PI writer, but you're a great cat cozy writer. And use that knowledge to guide future submissions. Maybe your style changed between what was rejected and what was accepted. You were writing Hemingway-esque, Dashiell Hammett type stories, and then the one they bought was more Agatha Christie. Think about that. What was the difference? And use that knowledge to guide. You don't want to write an exact duplicate of what they bought, but use that to help you determine the next thing to submit. This goes back to be professional in your relationship with your editors. Ask them questions. Don't overwhelm them, but sometimes ask questions. I had a writer who wanted to submit to one of my anthologies, but he had some questions. And not every editor will necessarily take the time to answer, but I answered his questions because he wasn't sure about a few things. And I answered them. He resolved those problems in his story before he ever submitted, and it worked out. He sold me the story. Be dependable. Goes back to do things on time. Respond to everything quickly, on time. Follow directions. If you're told to submit to a certain email address, you're told to put folios at the bottom of the page instead of the top. If you're told not to put them on, whatever the directions on, follow them. Meet your deadlines. This is especially important if you've been invited to submit to an anthology or invited to submit to something. The editor says, I need your story by January 1st. Don't tell them on January 1st, oh my God, I missed the deadline. No, if there's something seriously you're going to miss the deadline, you usually know that several weeks in ahead. You didn't wait till the last day to write. You say, my mother's been in an accident. We've been taking care at the hospital. I might be late turning my story in. Can I have an extension? If so, for how long? Again, some editors build in a little fudge factor for those situations. If you're constantly missing deadlines, then the problem isn't what's happening in your life. It's you're not organized. And be open to opportunities. You never know when something will fall in your lap. It could be that at a conference, you're talking to somebody and they say, I was going to edit this new anthology about crime-fighting corgis in Malta. And you happen to go, oh, I like corgis and I've been to Malta. And you might open up a dialogue and say, I've never written for you before, but I'd love the opportunity to send you something. And the editor may say, well, it'll be on spec at no promises. Boom. Or if somebody invites you to an anthology, be open to that. And the other thing is, be aware of your limitations. There's one writer I've used several times. I invited him to write a longer story, like 15 to 20,000 word novella or novelette, and he said flat out, "I just don't write that length." And great, wonderful. And I said, okay, next time we want something shorter. And because he was honest up front and said, I just don't do that. Okay, bingo. The same thing is sometimes maybe all you've been writing are cozies, and you've been doing pretty well with cozies, and an editor invites you to a hard-boiled anthology. You say, well, I've never written hard-boiled. I'd like the chance to, but this would be new to me. And it may turn into a maybe opportunity. Editor says, okay, I'm not going to promise anything, but if you try it, I'll give your story a fair shot. Leverage your ideas. I'm probably running a little long, so hold with me. Leverage your ideas, turning one sale into many. Series characters. If you write a story about a private eye, chances are you can write a second story about that private eye. If you write a story about a bookstore owner whose customers keep dying, you can probably get a second death, a third death. Think about reusable settings. One trick I use, if I have a character who lives in an apartment, every character of mine lives in the same apartment I lived in Chicago. I know how it's laid out. I know where the rooms are. I don't have to rethink it every time. Put it in an apartment building, first floor, third floor, faces north, faces south, still the same room. I've done that with, if my character needs to live in a 2 or 3 bedroom bungalow or a small brick house I used to live in Waco. Boom, I know how it's laid out. I don't have to rethink and recreate every time. I write a series of stories that are based in a fictional West Texas. So I use many towns come up over again. So I don't have to recreate. I don't write a story in Chicago and then write a story in San Antonio and then write a story in St. Petersburg and then write a story in London. So I don't have to research all that over and over and over again. And then consider holiday lists. It's not quite as a big deal with the mystery markets, but I know Queen and Hitchcock like Christmas stories or end of year stories. If you have a good idea, start thinking about that. I recently did a piece for an editor who was looking for holiday stories throughout the year, and I wrote an April Fool's Day. I asked her, has anybody taken April Fools? She said, no. Bingo, wrote an April Fool's based mystery. Back in the day when I wrote for women's magazines, they loved holiday stories. So I wrote New Year's Eve, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, Labor Day, Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. If I found something that looked like a holiday, I turned it into a story. Leverage your relationships, seek additional opportunities. If an editor's bought a story, or if an editor hasn't yet, but you'd like to work with them, let them know. Say, hey, Michael, I've read several of your, do a little sucking up. Let's be honest. Hey, Michael, I've read all of your Mickey Finn anthologies. I really love them. I would like an opportunity to submit to the next Mickey Finn, or whatever the series. Let editors know you're interested, because they won't know you're interested if you're not, or if you let them know. Post-publication, look at reprints and subsidiary rights. Seek opportunities to derive additional income from various sources. Again, like I said, I sold one story for $25 and a reprint for $500. I have some stories that I've sold 3, 4, 5, licensed, not sold, 3, 4, 5, 6 times over the years. So although maybe I didn't get much the first time, I'm $25 the first time, and then it got reprinted for $15, got reprinted later for $30. So over time, those stories have earned not a great deal of money, but I've gone out to McDonald's several times on the one story. And look at other off-the-wall opportunities. There was once a company that put short stories on their coffee bags. Who knew? And those opportunities are out there. Post-publication, make sure your work's submitted for the awards. Derringer, Shamus, and Thriller Awards allow you to submit your own work. Agatha, Anthony, and McCavity rely on fans. The Edgar Awards prefer the publishers to submit, but there's a backdoor way in. If your publisher or your editor won't submit your stories for the Edgars, there's a way you can do it. You have to contact the MWA office. Post-publication, if your story is nominated for or wins an award, selected for best of, you should thank your editor. Let your editor know. Now, maybe all the editor did was be smart enough to publish your story, didn't even change a comma. But most of the time, the editor has improved your story, at least a small amount, and sometimes significantly. And without that editor, your work would not have been good enough to be selected, and you would not have had that opportunity. When you have enough published, consider a collection. Crippen and Landru is the premier publisher of crime fiction anthologies. If you've reached the point where Crippen and Landru is interested, that's one of those touch points in your career. You've made it as a short story writer in the field. Level Best Books is also publishing collections. I've started that recently. Keep your good records. Know what you've licensed, to whom you've licensed them. Your writing income is taxable, so keep good records and claim your expenses, return your tax burden. Maybe you only earned $100, but you spent $99 on paper and ink. So that you want to reduce your tax burden as low as you legally can. Then pay it forward. Help beginning and newer writers through lectures, workshops, blog posts, online discussion groups. Do things that benefit the community, serve as officers, board members, and volunteers. Pay it back, pay it forward. And finally, good luck. And I know I've been zooming through this because there's a whole lot of material, but I've covered much of what you need to know, at least on a surface level. And we can go in more depth if somebody has specific questions. And what did I do? Cancel. And I put the handout I put up on again for anybody who came in late. So,
Hey, Michael.
yes.
I'm looking at, if anybody has questions, please put it in the chat. Sherry just asked, if you sell a reprint once, then someone else buys it for a second reprint. Do you tell them it's been published twice or just note the original publication?
I just note the original publication, unless, for example, somebody bought reprint rights and it's coming out this month, and somebody else wants reprint rights and it's coming out next month. Chances are those are going to be awfully close together. You should let the second reprint editor know that it's falling right on top of this other one. Now, I've had that happen where something came out a month apart, 2 reprints of the same story a month apart, but the markets were so vastly different that the readership was unlikely to be overlapping.
Huh, interesting. Do you can you talk a little bit about ShortCon right now, because it's coming up?
ShortCon. Yeah, ShortCon is coming up next month in Alexandria, Virginia. It is the premier conference for writers of short crime fiction. It's a one-day conference, and all we talk about is how to write, how to sell short crime fiction. Novelists are welcome, but they're not allowed to talk about novels. And it is jam-packed. We have a full breakfast, we have a morning speaker, we have a full lunch, we have afternoon speakers. So this year, Gary Phillips is going to do 3 hours on writing short stories, a craft section. And then in the afternoon, Michelle Slung, who's Otto Penzler's first reader for the best mystery stories of the year, and has been doing it for many years, is going to give us some background information on that. Art Taylor is going to come in and talk about building the novel in stories, how you write short stories that stand independent but can be assembled together to create a novel. Well, he's concentrating on the short stories. And then we have a panel discussion at the end with all of the speakers, and then we have an optional dinner. And it's very intensive. This is not a come and go kind of event. It's you show up and you are there in the same room with other short story writers. And I know several people who've made sales based on people they met. And I know several who advanced their careers a little bit. So I'm running it, but I think it's a worthwhile because it is the only conference specifically for writers of short crime fiction.
Chris,
On that,
I have a couple of questions in the Q&A that came up.
okay.
And I think that this may be answered by your handout, but the question was, where do you put the byline, last bullet of the slide, submitting short stories? Do you put it on the header or on the page with your address? Do you give all that info?
That's in the handout. In the top corner, you have your name, address, phone number, whatnot. About a third of the way down, you put the title of your story. The next line down is your byline. The next line down, although is going to be the first paragraph of your story.
So that's on the handout. Good.
That's on the handout, yes.
Back to you, Chris.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Myra says, what are the best sources for learning how to structure short stories? Or do we mirror the format we've used for 80,000 words? How tight are the rules?
The nice thing about short stories is the rules are pretty flexible. I've seen short stories that look like a grocery list, but once you've read the grocery list, you know what's happened. I've seen short stories that are dialogue only. There are a great many different ways to structure a short story that you could not do with a novel. I mean, I cannot imagine reading 80,000 words of shopping lists. I could not imagine reading 80,000 words that was only dialogue. At some point, I would probably get horribly lost. So one of the best way to learn about writing short stories is to read a lot of short stories. And what you do is you want to read the best short stories you can find so you know what to aspire to, and read the worst short stories you can find, so you know what the minimum quality level is to get published. So, and you want to hit somewhere in there. You want to be better than the worst and strive for the best.
Where do you find the worst short stories?
Oh, read my slush piles.
Oh.
No, well, I know that was a snarky answer, but
Yeah.
if you have an opportunity to read the slush pile for an anthology, for a convention anthology, for a magazine, for any kind of publication, you will see a great diversity of work coming across your desk. And you will start to see common problems, common themes, commonalities, and you go, wow, everybody does this and it makes no sense. Or what made this story great and publishable, but not this story, and yet they had the same theme? Or what is it? And you start to learn those things. And one of the best ways is to read a lot of slush pile. Now,
can I also suggest, and I just did this, is to volunteer as a reader for like the Derringers, because they get so many, and you've got 40 or 50 short stories to read, and you can see the cream of the crop rising.
Exactly. And these are all published stories. So again, you can see some of the best short stories being published, but you also see some others you go, yeah, I'm not sure how that got published, but it met that publication's needs in some way.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you there. Joanne asked, what is the best guide for starting to write short stories that you would recommend? I'm assuming, Joanne, you mean a book or
The dilemma, I wish I could recommend something specific, but it's been so long since I read a how to write book that I'm not sure what the best ones are.
Maybe attend ShortCon.
Attend ShortCon and ask the people there. Yeah. But again, one of the best things you can do is just read every short story you can. That's how I started. I did not come from an educated background, shall we say. I learned to write by pounding the keyboard, and I started writing professionally at 17. I did not have the education, the classes, the books. I read things like Writer's Digest magazine and the Writer magazine and all those things. I just absorbed them and read as much as I could, and slowly taught myself how to write.
Okay. Can you give us a little clue of what you see as the future of short stories?
The future, prognostication.
Oh. Yeah. Sorry.
It is really hard to know the future. At the present right now, for example, the mystery markets seem to be contracting a bit. Down and Out Books, which publish a lot of anthologies, closed. Black Cat Weekly, which publishes 10 stories a week, is closing at the end of October. Some other magazines and publications have closed recently. But at the same time, the horror field and science fiction and fantasy fields are going gangbusters. There are many markets for short stories in those genres. And if you can write in those genres or write close to those genres, those are good places. For example, what's considered dark crime is also non-supernatural horror. So whether you call it a horror story or a crime story depends on which publication you submit it to. Thrillers, for example, can straddle that line. They might have supernatural elements and might not, but might be horror. A slasher is considered a horror movie, but there might not be any supernatural elements whatsoever, just a crazy guy with a knife. It's a thriller, it's a slasher film. So that's why you should always be aware of other genres, what's happening in other genres. So what has happened in the past is a genre will contract for a while, and then it will expand again. And I've seen this at least 2, maybe 3 times during my writing career, where a genre contracts and then it comes back. And the markets start expanding, there are more markets again. So you can either stockpile your work because there aren't enough markets, or you can look for the non-mystery magazines like Saturday Evening Post, look for those markets, or look at, if I just change the story a little bit, it works as a non-supernatural horror story, and consider submitting to those markets.
Interesting. Yeah, because Wendy just said maybe write cross genre to revive mystery, like a horror story with a mystery embedded.
Exactly. And romance stories sometimes have mysteries. I forget what that's called. It's its own subgenre. So yeah, always look at cross genre, mix your genres. Definitely look at all the various markets. Romantic suspense. Yes, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
So what is the next new thing coming up for you besides ShortCon?
I have 2 stories coming out in Ellery Queens at some point in the future. I have 1 story coming out on Hitchcock at some point in the future. A lot of the anthologies that I edited for Down and Out Books are coming out from either Crimson Gate Books or White City Press. I've got a couple of anthologies due out from Level Best Books. I've got a couple stories coming out in Black Cat Weekly before it finally closes its doors. So,
okay. Well, one thing that I've always loved about your editing is that you've come up with some of the coolest titles of some of the anthologies that you've come up. And, I just want to get into those anthologies because of the title. Do you want to bring up any of those, or do you want to wait until they come out?
well, one of them was Private Dicks and Disco Balls. It was about private eyes in the 70s. And my publisher didn't realize it was a sophomoric joke until afterwards. It's too late. Sleuths Just Want to Have Fun, set in, the 80s. Kind of a play on a song from back in the day, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. We did Scattered, Smothered, Covered, and Chunked with Stacey Woodson. It's stories inspired by Waffle House. So that's one of the things that I try when I'm editing an anthology, is to come up with a good title, something that hasn't been done before. You get too many, here's Culinary Crimes. But, Death by Chocolate, although somebody's done it, is even better than Culinary Crimes. It's more engaging.
Yeah, but a Waffle House gives you a lot to work
Oh,
with.
yeah.
Okay, last one is Myra asked if you can cure writer's block, but how do you start there?
Okay. I personally don't believe there's any such thing as writer's block. There's real life. For example, if your spouse is in a serious accident, your cat gets run over, your child is arrested. These are kind of extreme, but something happens. You need to stop writing and take care of real life. Don't go, I'm blocked. Say, no, I have a real life issue to deal with. And after I have dealt with it, I can go back to writing. And that's very important, is you have to take care of yourself and the people around you. And secondarily, don't get hung up on a single project. Something I learned from a picture I saw of Isaac Asimov many, many years ago. He had a U-shaped desk and 3 Selectric typewriters arranged around the U. And he said, if he was writing something and he got stuck, he just turned his chair and started working on the next project. Get stuck on that one, turn his chair and work on the next project. And so what I have done over the years is I do essentially that, but on the computer. I've got a couple of dozen stories in progress, and I will, if I don't have a deadline or a specific project I'm working on, I will start reading through them and go, well, what happens next? Maybe I add a sentence. Maybe I add a whole scene. Maybe I add notes. I go, and I work out the plot, even though I don't write it yet. I've got the plot worked out. This morning and yesterday, I picked up on a story that I hadn't touched in several months. I know what happens next. And I've written like 3 or 4 scenes for the story. so that I don't produce story A and then I do story B and then I do story C. It's a little of A, a little B, a little C, a little D, back to A, back to D, over to Q. And so there's something always percolating. I'm always writing something. And then I'm never blocked.
So the Lollipop Man is coming up.
Well, actually, I'm going to have to send you a copy. I actually had a story published. It's not the Lollipop Man exactly, but I did use a briefcase full of lollipops.
Oh, good.
I will send you it. And
Yeah.
it got published. I'll send you a copy of that.
Okay, send that. I think we're close to being done now, Michael.
Okay.
You have you've inspired so many people here. Thank you so much. And if anybody has a question, you can still run up the chat and get the downloadable presentation here. Thank you. And Rick, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, Michael, thanks. That was a great presentation. It was greatly appreciated. I want to remind everyone that if you're a member of Capital Crimes, Michael's presentation will be on our YouTube channel in about a week. If you're not a member, please join. Our membership dues are $30 a year, another $60 for national, but it's the real value with all the events and speakers we have. And thanks again for attending, and hope you see you tomorrow at Old Haas Bookshop with Mac Daly, and Tuesday, June 9th with Elizabeth Crowan and her Meet the Author event. And finally, our next members meeting will be the 20th of June at our summer mingle at Tabor Ranch. With that, thanks again, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. See you in Virginia.
That's right.
Great.
Y'all
Thank
have
you.
a great weekend.
Y'all too. See you, Chris. See you, Michael.
Bye,
See you,
Danny.
Rick.
Bye, Dan.